The desperate corps captain, Sarah Chen, rubbed her tired eyes as she stared at the endless stream of data flowing across. Her command console at Frontier Station Alpha, the deep space monitoring outpost, orbited the edge of human territory, serving as humanity's early warning system for any threats emerging from the vast unknown regions of the galaxy. After 18 months of routine scanning and cataloging stellar phenomena, Chen had grown accustomed to the monotonous rhythm of deep space surveillance. The piercing alarm that suddenly filled the control center shattered the usual quiet atmosphere. Lieutenant Marcus Webb spun around from his communications array, his face pale with excitement and concern. "Captain, we're receiving an emergency transmission on all diplomatic frequencies. The signal is coming from the outer spiral beyond our normal monitoring range." Dr. Elena Rodriguez hurried from her linguistics station, portable translation equipment clutched in her hands. As the station's xenolinguistics specialist, she had spent years preparing for first contact scenarios, though most of her colleagues believed such an event was still decades away. The transmission pattern doesn't match any known human communication protocols. This is definitely alien in origin. Chen felt her heart rate accelerate as she processed the implications. Humanity had joined the Galactic Collective only 5 years earlier, but their integration had been limited and cautious. Most alien species viewed humans with suspicion due to Earth's classification as a classics death world, a designation reserved for planets so dangerous that their inhabitants were considered inherently violent and unpredictable. The main viewing screen flickered to life, displaying the incoming signals, wave patterns, and frequency analysis. Chief Petty Officer Janet Kim looked up from her sensor station with a mixture of awe and worry. "Captain, this signal is being transmitted with incredible power across multiple star systems simultaneously. Whoever sent this message wants to make sure it reaches as many civilizations as possible." Dr. Rodriguez connected her translation matrix to the main communication system, her fingers dancing across holographic controls as alien symbols began appearing on secondary displays. "The language structure is complex, but I'm getting preliminary results. The message appears to be a distress call, but there's something unusual about the phrasing." As the translation software processed more of the alien transmission, Rodriguez's expression grew increasingly troubled. "Captain, this is extraordinary. The beings sending this message are specifically requesting assistance from the warriors of the Death World, Terra. They're asking for humans by name." Chen stood up from her command chair and walked closer to the translation display. The implications of aliens specifically seeking human military intervention were staggering. What kind of threat could possibly make a spacefaring civilization desperate enough to ask for help from a species they've never encountered? The translation continued to develop, revealing more details about the aliens' desperate situation. Rodriguez read aloud as new information appeared on her screen. They identify themselves as the Zephyrian Republic, a confederation of peaceful worlds dedicated to scientific research and cultural exchange. They're being systematically attacked by something called the Shadow Claw Syndicate. Lieutenant Webb's communication equipment suddenly erupted with additional signals as monitoring stations throughout human space began detecting the same distress call. "Captain, this message is being received by every deep space facility in our network. The Zephyrians aren't just asking for our help, they're broadcasting their request across the entire galaxy." Chen felt a chill as she considered the political implications of responding to such a request. The Galactic Collective had strict protocols governing military intervention between member species, and humans were still considered provisional members under observation. Alina, What else can you tell me about their situation? Rodriguez continued working with the translation matrix, her face growing pale as more disturbing details emerged. Captain, the Shadowclaw Syndicate isn't just conquering Zephyrian worlds. They're harvesting the population for slave labor and using captured civilians as test subjects for biological weapons. The death toll is already in the millions. The control center fell silent as everyone processed the horrific information. Chen had served in the Terran Defense Force for 15 years. But the systematic genocide being described by the Zephyrians was beyond anything she had encountered during humanity's own conflicts. Chief Kim looked up from her sensor analysis with additional troubling news. Captain, I'm detecting follow-up transmissions from the same source. The Zephyrians are providing detailed star charts showing affected systems and enemy fleet positions. They're not just asking for help, they're providing tactical intelligence. Before Chen could respond, the station's priority communication system activated with an incoming message from Earth Command. Admiral Patricia Santos appeared on the main screen, her expression grave as she addressed the Frontier Station crew. Captain Chen, I'm sure you've intercepted the alien distress calls by now. I need to inform you that the Galactic Collective Council has already issued a response to this situation. Chen felt her stomach drop as she anticipated the Admiral's next words. The political reality of humanity's position in galactic society meant that their military options were severely limited by diplomatic considerations. The Council has classified the conflict between the Zephyrians and the Shadowclaw Syndicate as an internal matter involving non-member species. All Galactic Collective members are ordered to maintain strict neutrality and avoid any military intervention. Admiral Santos paused, her expression showing the same frustration that Chen felt. Captain, I know this goes against every instinct you have as a military officer, but our hands are tied. Dr. Rodriguez looked up from her translation, work with tears in her eyes. Admiral, the Zephyrians are describing systematic extermination of entire planetary populations. They're targeting children specifically because they're easier to control and transport. How can the Council call this an internal matter? The Admiral's expression showed her own moral struggle with the situation. Doctor, I understand your feelings, but humanity's position in the Galactic Collective is still fragile. Any unauthorized military action could result in our expulsion from galactic society and economic sanctions that would devastate Earth's development. Lieutenant Webb suddenly interrupted with new intelligence from his monitoring equipment. Admiral, Captain, I'm detecting additional transmissions from the affected region. The Shadowclaw forces are using captured Zephyrian communication systems to broadcast surrender demands to other civilizations in the sector. Chen walked to the observation deck and stared out at the stars, knowing that somewhere in that vast darkness, an entire civilization was being destroyed, while political considerations prevented anyone from helping. Her military training had taught her that sometimes the right choice required personal sacrifice and the courage to act despite consequences. Marcus, what's the current status of our deep space communication array? Can we reach Admiral Torres with the Third Fleet directly? Chun's question caused everyone in the control center to look at her with understanding and concern. Yes, Captain, but any message to fleet assets will be monitored by Galactic Collective oversight systems. They'll know we're violating direct orders from the Council. Webb's warning was clear, but he began preparing the communication equipment anyway. Chen turned back to face her crew and Admiral Santos on the communication screen. Admiral, I've spent 15 years serving in the Terran Defense Force, and I've always followed orders without question. But some situations require us to choose between following orders and doing what's right. The Admiral closed her eyes and took a deep breath before responding. Sarah, I can't officially authorize what you're considering. Any action you take will be completely without support from Earth Command, and the consequences could end your military career. Alina sent a response to the Zephyrian distress call. Tell them that their message has been received and that the warriors of Terra are coming. Chun's decision seemed to energize everyone in the control center as they began preparing for what would come next. Dr. Rodriguez nodded and began composing the response message. What should I tell them about timing, Captain? Chen studied the star charts showing the distance to Zephyrian space and calculated travel times for human military assets. Tell them to hold on for 8 days, Alina. Tell them that Deathworlders don't abandon innocents to predators, and the Shadowclaw Syndicate has made their final mistake. As the message was transmitted into deep space, Chen knew that she had just committed herself, and potentially her entire crew, to a course of action that would change everything. The question now was whether humanity was ready to show the galaxy what Deathworld warriors could accomplish when properly motivated. Admiral Jackson Torres received Chun's communication while his fleet conducted training exercises in the Outer Rim. The veteran commander had spent 30 years in space, but the intelligence package from Frontier Station Alpha contained information that challenged everything he understood about galactic politics and military ethics. Deathworld Unleashed. Torres stood on the bridge of the UTES Retribution. As his fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of Zephyrian territory, the sight that greeted them was worse than anything described in the distress transmissions. Massive Shadowclaw dreadnoughts hung in orbit around what had once been beautiful garden worlds, while smaller vessels moved between the planets and enormous processing stations that had been constructed from the wreckage of civilian infrastructure. Commander Lisa Park joined Torres at the main observation window, her expression grim as she studied the tactical display showing enemy positions throughout the star system. As the fleet's intelligence specialist, she had spent the 80-day journey analyzing every piece of available information about Shadowclaw military doctrine and capabilities. Admiral long-range sensors are detecting atmospheric burning on 3 of the outer planets. The Shadowclaw forces aren't just occupying these worlds, they're systematically sterilizing them. Park's report confirmed the worst fears about what they would find upon arrival. Dr. Michael Chang looked up from his xenobiology station with additional disturbing information. Sir, I'm reading massive biosignature disruptions across all inhabited worlds in this system. Based on the data patterns, I estimate that 70% of the original population has been eliminated or removed from their home planets. A communication signal reached the human fleet from a hidden facility deep within the largest planet's crust. The holographic projector activated to show a tall, graceful being with translucent skin and large, luminous eyes that seemed to hold the weight of tremendous sorrow. The alien's voice carried musical tones that somehow conveyed both desperation and hope. Warriors of Terra, I am Prime Researcher Leorile of the Zephyrian Scientific Collective. We had heard legends of your species from traders who ventured into your territory, but we never dared hope that you would respond to our call for assistance. The alien's image flickered as energy weapons discharged somewhere near her hiding. Torres stepped forward to address the Zephyrian leader. Prime Researcher, I am Admiral Jackson Torres of the Terran Expeditionary Fleet. We've brought 48 ships and full military complements. Our species has a saying that no one fights alone, and we intend to honor that principle here. Lirile's expression showed amazement at the size of the human response. Admiral, your generosity overwhelms us, but you must understand what you face. The Shadowclaw Syndicate has over 300 vessels in our territory, and their technology surpasses anything our peaceful civilization ever developed. They have been conquering worlds for millennia. Colonel Rachel Stone had been studying the enemy fleet composition from her position at the Tactical Planning Station. The Marine Corps officer had noticed several interesting details about military deployment that suggested potential weaknesses in their operational doctrine. Admiral, I've been analyzing their ship positioning and movement patterns. The Shadowclaw forces are arranged for maximum psychological impact rather than optimal combat effectiveness. They're clearly accustomed to enemies who surrender quickly, rather than fight back. Stone transmitted her analysis to all human vessels in the fleet. Captain David Kim, commanding the assault carrier Fierce Determination, reviewed Stone's tactical assessment and immediately recognized the implications. Admiral, these aliens have been using intimidation and overwhelming force for so long that they've forgotten how to fight a real war. They're expecting fear, not the human response. The Shadowclaw fleet commander's image suddenly appeared on all communication channels as the massive reptilian alien demanded to speak with the human force. Overlord Vraxis appeared on screen with his scarred hide covered in ceremonial armor that displayed the skulls of conquered species. So, the famous Deathworlders have come to play hero in our hunting grounds. I have studied reports about your species, but you clearly lack the intelligence to recognize superior firepower when you encounter it. The alien's voice carried the arrogance of someone accustomed to easy victories. Torres opened a fleet-wide communication channel to respond. To the Shadowclaw commander, Overlord Vraxis, I am Admiral Jackson Torres, representing the Terran Expeditionary Force. You have 60 minutes to cease all hostile actions against the Zephyrian Republic and begin withdrawing from this system. Failure to comply will result in the complete destruction of your forces. The alien overlord's laughter filled the bridge of every ship in both fleets. Humans, your reputation for foolish bravery appears to be accurate. My fleet outnumbers yours 8-1, and our weapons technology is centuries ahead of your primitive systems. Surrender now and serve the Shadowclaw Empire, or be destroyed where you drift. Dr. Chang had been analyzing Shadowclaw fleet emissions during the exchange, and his findings revealed critical information about enemy capabilities. Admiral, their ships are indeed more powerful than ours individually, but I'm detecting inefficiencies in their power distribution and weapon targeting systems. They're designed to overwhelm weak opponents rather than engage determined resistance. Commander Park smiled as she reviewed the tactical data. Admiral, these aliens have been bullying weaker civilizations for so long that they've developed bad habits. Their formation looks impressive, but it has significant vulnerabilities that coordinated human tactics could exploit. Colonel Stone activated her communication link to the Marine assault ships positioned throughout the fleet. All ground forces, prepare for combat deployment. We're dealing with predators who have never faced prey that fights back. Show them why you don't threaten a Deathworld species. The first exchange of weapons fire revealed exactly what the human analysis had predicted. Shadowclaw vessels opened up with massive energy weapons capable of destroying entire cities, but their targeting systems were calibrated for large, slow-moving targets that would attempt to avoid engagement. Human ships scattered in seemingly random directions, using three-dimensional maneuvers that had been developed through centuries of warfare in Earth's hostile environment. Overlord Vraxis watched in confusion as his fleet's opening bombardment missed most of its intended targets. What kind of combat maneuvers are these? he demanded as human vessels appeared to dance through space while returning precise, coordinated fire. Where is their formation discipline? How are they maintaining tactical coordination while moving? So chaotically, Captain Kim's fighter squadrons had already launched, and were exploiting the confusion created by the capital ship engagement. All pilots, remember your training. Shadowclaw psychology profiles indicate they become disoriented when faced with unpredictable attack patterns. Hit them fast, disappear, then strike from a different angle. The human fighters moved through space like schools of fish, their individual actions seeming random, but actually following complex coordination. Algorithms that had been developed for combat in asteroid fields and debris clouds around Earth. Shadowclaw defensive systems, designed to track predictable attack runs, found themselves unable to maintain target locks on the constantly shifting human formations. Colonel Stone's Marines were already boarding Shadowclaw vessels, using assault pods that had been launched during the initial weapons exchange. All boarding teams, standard Deathworld protocols apply. These aliens have never faced opponents who use their own ships against them, secure their command centers, and turn their weapons on their fleet mates. The Shadowclaw crews found themselves facing human soldiers who treated the interior of an enemy vessel like three-dimensional terrain to be exploited. Marines moved through ship corridors, using tactics developed for urban warfare and cave fighting, turning every junction and compartment into a potential ambush point. Overlord Vraxis realized that his centuries of easy conquests had not prepared his forces for enemies who refused to follow conventional military doctrine. All ships fall back to defensive positions around the processing stations. Use the Zephyrian prisoners as shields against human attacks. The threat to civilian lives changed the tactical situation completely, but not in the way the commander expected. Human forces had extensive experience dealing with hostage situations and asymmetric warfare scenarios. Rather than retreating, the human fleet began implementing rescue operations that treated each processing station as a complex three-dimensional puzzle to be solved. Captain Kim's fighters provided precision strikes that disabled Shadowclaw defensive systems without damaging the structures holding Zephyrian prisoners. Colonel Stone's Marines used infiltration techniques to secure prisoner-holding areas before the enemy could implement their threats. Dr. Chang's science teams had identified Shadowclaw biological weaknesses that could be exploited using non-lethal weapons. Prime Researcher Lirelei watched in amazement as human forces systematically dismantled Shadowclaw operations throughout her star system. Admiral Torres, your warriors fight unlike anything we have ever witnessed. They treat this battle as if it was some kind of complex problem to be solved, rather than a traditional military engagement. Torres nodded as he observed his forces implementing tactics that had been developed through humanity's long history of warfare against both natural disasters and hostile opponents. Prime Researcher, humans learned long ago that the best way to defeat a stronger enemy is to make them fight your kind of war instead of theirs. The liberation of the first processing station revealed the full scope of Shadowclaw atrocities and strengthened human resolve to complete their mission. Zephyrian prisoners who had been destined for slavery or experimentation were freed by Marines, who treated each rescue as a sacred duty rather than a military objective, as the battle concluded with the complete destruction or retreat of Shadowclaw forces. Admiral Torres received a priority communication from the Galactic Collective Council. The political consequences of human intervention were about to begin, but the successful rescue of an entire civilization had established humanity's reputation as protectors of the innocent. The galaxy would never again underestimate the warriors from the death world called Terra. Asterisk.